Hi, welcome. This is a reading of Walking a Rainbow by me, Michael Shearer, about my son, aged 9 at the time, Kez, and I walking the Camino de Santiago. This is chapter 19, called Patterns in Time. Kez and I left Burgos alone, following the spacious Rio Alanthon beneath the shade of horse chestnuts and crossing it over a wide bridge. The last building on the edge of Burgos is a prison. On the road to Tardajos, a group of tattily dressed kids with a couple of scrawny dogs caught us up and tried to beg some money. I shook my head, and the eldest said a few rough words, and one of the dogs slunk up behind me and bit me in the groin. Good water in Rabe, and then the path began to climb. Trees got scarce and then disappeared altogether. Just a very few stunted shrubs, no shade. The blazing sun directly ahead, making us squint. Across the vast, parched landscape ahead, we could count a few trees near the horizon. The grass by the cart track was like straw. Even the weeds were dying. We crossed a dusty ridge to see the village of Hornillos ahead and below us. Then my ankles finally gave out completely. I'd been taking double the recommended dose of painkillers for some days. Now my ankles had locked. I just couldn't bend them in the right places to enable me to walk at all. I sat where I stood and then dragged myself over the dust towards some shriveled scrub. I couldn't get all of my body in the skimpy shade, just the top half. Kez was understandably very concerned. "What are we going to do, Dad?" "I don't know." The landscape was empty in both directions. "Do you want some tea?" "Okay, maybe I'll feel better after a bit of rest. You all right in the sun there, Kez?" "Yeah, it's not so bad. I'm a bit tired though." He set up the stove and brewed some tea. I took off my boots and socks to get some air to my feet and rubbed some lavender oil into my ankles. The backs had swellings like walnuts. I reluctantly took another pill. After about half an hour and some more tea, my ankles seemed to loosen up a little, and Kez helped me to my feet. I hobbled very slowly down into Hornillos. A group of villagers sat on the shady side of the single main street. I asked them the way to the refuge. A man, his face dark with stubble and from working in the fields in the hot sun, said something I didn't catch, and they all laughed. I repeated my request. Again, I didn't understand the reply fully, something about building a new one, but it was clear there was no refuge available. I took off my rucksack and rummaged in it for my Spanish phrasebook. They all waited and made a few comments and laughed again. I found a suitable sentence and asked if there was a room in the village where we could stay, a pension perhaps. More laughter. "They're laughing at us, Dad." Kez was plainly right, though perhaps sneering was a more accurate description. They looked poor. Maybe they resented a new refuge being built for the relatively well-off pilgrims endlessly passing through. I thanked them, bowed slightly, and made ready to move off. They found this quite hilarious. I limped away, trying to keep my dignity. A gale of laughter followed us down the empty street. The houses either side were very simple and basic, and all shut up like blank faces. A dog with enormous dugs, looking like a wolf, loped past. A shepherd brought in a herd of goats down the street, bells round their neck tinkling. I nodded greeting. He ignored us. Some sparrows mobbed a kestrel, while a young man took pot shots at them with an air rifle. The bar at the exit to the village was sparse and cheerless. The woman behind the bar seemed old before her time, all in black, a skinny body and a drawn face. She was immensely sad. The few youngsters lounging about seemed to resent our presence. I asked her for accommodation. She was much more sympathetic, but made it clear there was none. No shop either. We walked out and into the empty landscape, feeling pretty disconsolate. "Where's the next refuge, Dad?" "On Tanas." "Is it far?" 9 kilometres, I think. 5 miles and a bit. I stumped along, awkwardly and slowly. 5 miles would take us a very long time. Nothing but empty fields and an undulating path. I was even slower on the slight slopes. We rested often. The evening light was beautifully warm and orange. It can't get too cold at night. Perhaps we could make these straw bales into some sort of shelter. But I wasn't sure if I could move one. They looked heavy. And in fact, in this open landscape under a totally clear sky, it would get quite cold at night. I felt guilty. I should be looking after him. I ought to provide somewhere to stay. We laboured on, getting slower and slower. A building appeared off the path to the left, a very strange building, isolated amid the fields. It looked like a cross between a temple and a barn. It was only small, 1 room, but it had a dome. It became clear it was this or nothing. There was no other building in sight in any direction. We wouldn't make it to Antanas, and it was beginning to get dark. We turned off the main path at a sign saying San Boyo, committed to this place, and shuffled along the 1/4 of a mile to reach it. I even thought that if it was locked, I would consider trying to break in. It was an oasis. The building stood like an oriental bungalow in its own patch of green. In the centre of the green, an open tank, like a miniature swimming pool of superb water, so cold it put the teeth on edge and was fringed by delicate willows. The building wasn't locked. Inside its rough stone walls was a room like a stable. A concrete floor strewn with straw, a single window glowing with the aftermath of the setting sun, wooden beams above. It was warm and dry. Home. This was better than any cheap hotel room. No electricity, no facilities at all, except just what we needed. We rested in contentment and gratitude. I lit some candles for light and got the stove ready to cook. The candlelight made the place cosy, and the smell was simple and homely. The candles kept the room warm too, as the sun's heat seeped away. "What have we got to eat, Dad?" "Frankfurters," I replied, waving a vacuum pack. "Not much bread, though. I was hoping to get some in Hornillos." "No matter." "Oh dear. What's up?" I offered him the pack to sniff. Definitely off. "Never mind. This means the emergency sardines. Very filling sardines." The sardines were off too. The sell-by date was 2 years earlier. I took stock. 1 cup of soup, 2 crusts of stale bread, 2 tea bags, 1 cigarette. We shared it all, including the cigarette. I knew Kes already smoked. You can't keep such secrets in a village. A neighbour had remarked in the pub back home that Kes had been seen puffing away behind the bus shelter. There seemed no point in pretending that I didn't know. I'm sorry, Kes. What for? This is the best place so far. We can hack it, Dad. I like it here. So do I. It's a great day for Scotland, remarked Kes mysteriously, settling the point. We sat outside in the cool of the evening, peaceful and quite happy, alone in the landscape under a full moon whose soft light caused gentle waving shadows of the young trees on the stone walls. Bats skittered about and a barn owl flew by. The night was utterly quiet, save for the endless supply of silver water tinkling into the tank. In the morning I let Kes sleep late and busied about washing all our clothes, including those I was wearing, and laid them on the yellow grass to dry in the early sun. Then I washed up all our bowls and pots and pans. I enjoyed being domestic. While I was naked I washed in the freezing water, and all manner of thing was good, very good. I fixed things. The rucksack and my trousers both needed sewing. The camera and the stove were repaired. Kes woke with the intrusion of the first troop of cyclists around midday. They wore all the fashionable cycling gear and boasted about the distance they had covered already that day. French, macho types, slick with suntan oil, muscles everywhere, and solely concerned with using them. They posed by their machines a while, photographing each other, and then raced off, jostling for position on the narrow track. Les coqs sportifs on the Tour d'Espagne. Competition is an ugly business. 3 Basque cyclists arrived. They were very keyed up, still with the rhythm of cycling in their actions, twittery like blue tits. 3 or 4 minutes of clipped sentences and they were away, exactly like a small flock of finches. We prepared to leave at an easy-going pace, refreshed in clean clothes, both feeling in harmony with the place. Our breakfast was water. How's your ankles, Dad? Ankles? I'd forgotten all about them, and the painkillers. Well, they seem okay this morning. Back on the path, another gang of cyclists noisily zoomed past us, followed by a van carrying their gear, bumping along the track. One man leaning out with a video camera, recording the progress of the happy racers. He looked like something out of a comedy film and felt quite insane. The landscape achieved a new apotheosis of dust. I've never been in such an arid place. Nothing grew save in the irrigated fields. Green harvesters cropped barley in a cloud of dust. The countryside was an African study in shades of fawn. Behind us, on the horizon, appeared a single figure in a pith helmet with a gait like the back legs of a camel. We stopped in the shadow of some bales to allow Claudio to catch up. "Hi man, how was the filming?" He settled between us and passed his water bottle. "I think it was maybe a mistake to make the film." "Why?" "Angel, the director, he makes a lie of it." "What do you mean?" "He has no script, so he makes up a story. I had to have an injury. Tomato sauce down my leg. I limp around San Juan. I had hoped that the film would bring more people to the Camino, but not with a lie." "Never mind. How's that young girl?" I had no idea why I'd asked, why she came to mind. What young girl? The one in the film crew that I chatted to in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. You know, curly hair and a blue anorak. Oh, she's dead. He saw my look of horror. A motoring accident. He shrugged. It is quite common in Spain. When? When did it happen? I don't know, a while ago. He looked at me intently. You seem much troubled. She was the girl with the curly red hair like a child's doll. So? Do you remember the lacerated teddy bear in Navarrete at the roadside? You said that someone I know might have a violent death. We stared at each other. There seemed nothing to say. We moved off in silence through this shadeless land. There was grit in the dusty wind. Grasshoppers landed splat in the powdered earth like drops of rain. The few butterflies here were as dark as their shadow. Where the hell is Ontanas? Surely we should have reached it by now. That is Ontanas, there. He indicated half a church tower rising up like a barb in a lion's pelt. That's it, half a tower. Gradually, as we advanced, it grew apace. Ontanas is built in a hollow, a dust bowl, and emerges when approached as if slowly jacked up, or as if the very earth was painfully giving birth to the village out of its own parched self. The low hills around were like tawny slag heaps. Ontanas was spawned from them, formed of dried mud and rust. We tramped through the deserted streets until accosted by a slab of the most vivid, shimmering ultramarine. It was so alien and unexpected that for a moment I couldn't recognise it. An open-air swimming pool. This was too good to miss. We walked through the entrance, commenting on the stroke of genius responsible for building this incongruity in such a place. Near the entrance, beneath a large colourful umbrella, sat a wiry man with a trim beard and a luxuriant crop of salt and pepper hair on his bare chest. It made him look virile, as if his body was using up an excess of energy. Two middle-aged women flanked him like a retinue. He called to us in English and introduced himself. Ed, a lecturer in Spanish language and literature from the University of Kentucky, doing the walk. He seemed very pleased to meet fellow native English speakers, the first he'd met on the way. We sat down and ordered a beer. The conversation flitted in and out of Spanish and English. Claudio and Ed took to each other at once. Kez and I left them chatting while we took a dip in the surprisingly cool water under such a hot sun. As we swam, swallows trawled the surface for insects. This was the life. It felt so luxurious. Translucent blue like liquid sapphire all around. A vibrant, deeper blue above. Claudio and Ed, I noticed, were locked in intense conversation. As locals arrived in ones and twos, loudspeakers began to blare obtrusive music. Soon couples were sunbathing on the grass around the pool. The women were exquisite, perfectly formed, confident, with delicious creamy brown skin. I wondered idly how their companions could forbear to caress such beautiful arms, a promise of softness singled by a smooth complexion. An odour of grilled meat and garlic wafted around. We got out to order some food. There was no room at Ed's table, so we sat nearby. Claudio eventually came over to join us. He frowned over a blank sheet of paper. "Are you drawing a picture?" asked Kes. "No, I'm trying to guess Ed's birth sign," he replied. My mind went black. "October 20th, I said without thinking. "A Scorpio, yes, it could be. I was thinking maybe Libra." "Don't ask me, Claudio. I know nothing about the signs." "I will ask him." He leaned over towards Ed and said casually, "Were you born in late October?" "Jesus Christ," he said, clearly startled. "How could you have guessed that? October 29, in fact." He looked shocked, as if Claudio could peer into the recesses of his life and spout disreputable secrets. His reaction was far in excess of the success of a simple lucky guess, as if his view of the world was shaken. Claudio turned back to me. "How did you do that, Michael?" "I have absolutely no idea. I think it must be your moon in Pisces. We must look at your chart." "Mine too," pleaded Kes. "Of course, yours too." He turned back to Ed. "And where were you born?" he asked, his pencil poised over his pad. At exactly this moment the PA system launched into Bruce Springsteen and Born in the USA. Ed's eyes went panicky. This sort of thing just could not happen. Despite his sophistication, there was something boyish about Ed, something likeable, a sort of wide-open readiness for experience, a vulnerability. Claudio and I both laughed, and Ed laughed too, his eyes visibly moistening. Later, as we took our leave, he hugged us a bit too warmly for my repressed English sensitivities. I got the impression he didn't want us to go. "Any parting words of advice?" he asked. "I know you've done a lot of walking." "Find your own rhythm," I replied. "Always walk at your own pace. Take your time. Give the Camino a chance to do its work." I meant it, but it sounded pretentious, and I felt embarrassed. "Will we meet again?" he asked Claudio, looking him straight in the eye. "Maybe, it is likely, but if not, you have my address. You will write." We left, waving. The walking would have been easy down a level, powdery path like white sand, and then a tree-lined road, except for the plague of cyclists sweeping past us, dangerously close, every few minutes. As they passed, most yelled a greeting, a Dopplered "Buenos dias" or "Adios." At first I answered them in kind, but as I grew more irritated I yelled "Soros" instead, which sounded much the same. Kes twigged. "Why are you shouting, Dad?" I told him. "You shouldn't do that. It's not nice." "Bloody pests. You should be more careful. Things like that come back at you." "Nonsense. You'll see." The dead straight road went on forever. A tractor stopped and offered us a lift, which we refused. We took a break in the first bar in Castro Jerez. Swimming from Sheffield was on the TV. On a whim, I ordered a gin and tonic. The barman almost filled a tumbler with gin and added about half an inch of tonic. "I think I might need that tractor," I remarked ruefully. Further into town, a family sitting on chairs and a makeshift bench outside their house called us over. The father, a slim, swarthy man, still with the grime of the fields on him, offered me an implement which looked like something used to collect urine samples from a female rhino. It was a bulbous glass jar half full of red wine with a narrowing tube sticking out one side. Seeing my indecision, he laughed and demonstrated its use, throwing back his head, holding it at a distance, and pouring the wine in a thin stream expertly straight down his throat. I had a ham-fisted try, much to the amusement of all. Kes declined. It appeared Castro Jerez was determined to get me drunk. The refuge was in the basement of a house. The walls were covered with lurid amateur murals of couples dancing. Some sort of youth club. That evening, everyone staying in the refuge, except Claudio and Kez, went on a joint pub crawl. It's all a bit hazy, but I recall hot, crowded bars, a fruit machine which talked to me, being introduced to a man on his 24th pilgrimage to Santiago, a student of English philology from Salamanca who knew more about English grammar than I ever will, and 3 young women from Barcelona. One very vivacious who had studied English in Manchester, and another called Marta, who had the most beautifully deep, soulful brown eyes. To look into them was like falling out of an aeroplane. I remember staggering back to the hostel and descending the stairs with some difficulty to see a familiar figure sitting on the floor in the centre of the shadowy room talking to 2 young women. Roger, the careers officer from the college, who had also been affected by the lecture back in London enough to try the walk. A big man, but normally quiet and restrained, even shy. He waved a bottle of red wine at me as if it were the most natural thing in the world that I should suddenly turn up like this. "Ah, Mike, we need a philosopher here. Come and have a drink and join this political discussion." "You're right," I cried, lurching down the last of the stairs. "We have nothing to lose but our brains. The rest is a blank."